Hello, everyone. It's a beautiful spring day here for me outside Berlin. I'm really happy that you're joining us here, maybe during your lunch break, your morning break, or on the replay. We have a really great program, and I'm already getting excited for you know who in the World Cup. I've got Amanda Brooks and Lara Barboza here with me. We're going to be talking about three key trends that you and your company need to be aware of to be successful this World Cup. And I know those budgets are already locked in. It's March and we're talking about June. There are still things that you can do today to have better results, to really catapult your brand forwards. So we're here for you on that. We're going to talk about that here today with me and my two expert guests. Three topics we're going to cover in this 60 minutes. Uh, the first one is live streaming second screen experiences, which is all I've been hearing about from product teams, and alternative broadcast, why these matter and how they are shaping the viewer experience and the consumer experience for sports globally. The second topic is from broadcast to community and sporting moments. Why community and why the sporting moment is the hottest topic for marketers right now. And finally, we've got practical takeaways for brands, marketers, and media teams to get more out of this World Cup with that precious, massive budget that you know you need to get right. So I'm really excited to have Amanda and Laura help us all out on that. We'll have Q&A, so if you're in LinkedIn, if you're in YouTube, or if you're even watching the replay, just drop us a comment. We'll be taking live questions at the last 20 minutes of the broadcast. So I'm excited. Let me introduce you to my two guests. I'm joined today by Lara and Amanda. So Lara Barboza built her career in television and global media across Latin America and Europe, driven by a deep interest in cultural moments and how media ecosystems shape our collective attention, something I'm passionate about at Omnisent as well. And with her 12 years in media and cultural storytelling, Lara knows how major moments translate into brand relevance. Today, she's a fractional marketing lead and brand builder, helping ethical AI and SaaS companies scale with purpose across Europe and the United States. So, welcome, Lara Barboza.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Neil, for having me here. I'm very excited for this conversation with you and Amanda.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And we are joined by Amanda Brooks, who is a strategic marketer and natural storyteller. I know this. Amanda and I recently got to catch up in person in Barcelona. Thanks, Amanda, for the amazing food and wine tips. Always a pleasure to be in town, and you are a great, great local guide in Barcelona. Thanks so much for that. Amanda has spent her career at the intersection of sports, gaming, and live streaming, a kind of underappreciated, I think a little bit underrated, underhyped area that we're going to show you a lot more about today. Helping brands show up where fans are actually paying attention. And that attention intelligence is something that's super relevant for what I'm building at Omniscient Sports. So Amanda has led B2B marketing across analytics, ad tech, and sponsorship-focused products, turning complex data and platforms into stories and campaigns that resonate with the rights holders and with advertisers and brand partners. Now, Amanda's director of marketing at Livad, and she focuses on connecting brands with Gen Z and millennial audiences through live streams in a way that is native to their viewing experience, adds value for fans, and delivers measurable results and outcomes for those partners. So, yeah, Amanda, great to have you here. Yeah.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, excited to chat with you and Lara.
Perfect, perfect. And rounding it off, my name is Neil Metzler. I'm the founder of Omnisent Sports. We are social media analyzed for sports. We help marketers and brands deliver more optimized outcomes when it comes to return on advertising spend, brand ambassadors and brand partnerships, and monetizing the moment, which we will talk about here today. Everything attention intelligence, social analytics, that's what we are building at Omniscient Sports. So, Lara, I wanted to start with an amazing story that you told me here that really hits on live streaming, second screen, and the alternative broadcast phenomenon. And we're going to take a cultural example from Brazil with Casemiro, or as he and his crew are better known, Kazet TV. So can you tell me, Laura, why is it that Kaza TV is taking the world by storm right now and actually secured rights to broadcast the digital broadcast rights for World Cup in Brazil ahead of a leading traditional cable broadcast provider. And also has booked something like, is it 400 million USD or 600 million USD in brand partnerships? Like what, how has a live streamer, only a live streamer, done what no traditional broadcaster in Brazil could do on the biggest stage, on the world's biggest stage for football, and that is the World Cup?
Yeah, Casimiro Miguel, Casé TV. For the ones who are in Brazil, probably heard about it or engaged with some of their memes at some point. But for the ones who are not in Brazil, I think worth to mention, they are a digital streaming channel focused in sports and entertainment. And they were launched in 2022 precisely to transmit some of the World Cup games. And there is a curious story behind it. And as you mentioned, the name of the channel is Casimiro Miguel. And the channel was named after him. But the curious fact is that he's not the main owner. The main owner is a company named Live Mode, and they were the responsible for negotiate the transmission during 2022 World Cup, and for free, of course. This was the curious fact about it.
So this was the buildup, right? So
Yeah,
this channel is not coming out of nowhere. They've
yeah,
used the last World Cup cycle to kind of establish presence. I know they do also daily, weekly at all levels of Brazilian football, but
yeah.
what is it that they set the table with in 2022 that really opened the door for this 2026 opportunity?
Yeah, I think the main fact was they changed it kind of the way people consume sports, especially live sports in Brazil, and I dare to say abroad also, because they had this home feeling behind it. And the stories was kind of, the channel was launched kind of last minute negotiation. And the story behind it is that the main channel that you mentioned, TV Globo at the point, was trying to renegotiate the transmission rights for the FIFA World Cup. And in this negotiation, they kind of decided not to transmit digitally. And at this point, the rights were for free, was for whom wanted to take it, and Live Mode decided to take. So was kind of unprepared last minute, but was a huge success because they had this unprepared and lo-fi vibe where Casimiro Miguel, Casé TV, invited people and they come in, they generated thousands of memes. And this was what made the channel a huge success at this point.
So I'm seeing on YouTube 25.2 million subscribers on Kazet TV. I'm imagining what this World Cup is going to mean in terms of just taking this to the next level. But I wanted to underscore the dynamic there between the rights, the traditional purchaser of those exclusive digital broadcast rights. You told me it was like a cost factor that the traditional broadcaster was not willing to go to the mat and pay more to get those digital rights. So they just kind of came into the public domain. Tell me a bit more about how that all played out.
Yeah, this is a very curious fact. I believe at this point, despite the fact that we were during COVID and live transmission were started to become a huge habit of consumers, main and traditional TV channels, I think they haven't thought at the point that this will be, or at this point was a huge thing. So they, and especially Casimiro Miguel, had the previous experience in channels like Twitch, transmitting sports related topics. And they understand that this will be the next consumption window. So Live Mode at this point was like very on point on that.
That's a really interesting confluence of factors and opportunity seized by the team behind Casemiro. So I wanted to bring Amanda into this. Like, why are you surprised or not surprised at seeing this breakthrough moment for a quote unquote live streamer in sports? We're talking about billion plus viewers, the biggest global event once every 4 years. And this Brazil example, where this will be carried for the first time, not as a pure second screen, but as actually like the digital broadcast. Like, Amanda, what are the layers here that are most important for brands and marketers to understand?
Yeah, I'm definitely not surprised to see it. Obviously, I've been in the industry for over 4 years now, and we've kind of seen live streaming, blossom in COVID-19 during the pandemic. It grew extremely high, and we're actually almost back to those pandemic levels. I think 36 billion hours watched on Twitch, YouTube, Kick, all the live streaming platforms last year. So it is a huge platform. It's still growing. And I'm seeing I think live streaming and gaming kind of goes under the radar for brands and marketers a lot. It's kind of seen as this maybe niche hobby. I think there's these stereotypes still that gamers are antisocial, or I think a lot of legacy brands can think that sometimes. But really, there's such a huge crossover, not only with sports, um, but with just cultural moments in general. I see live streaming creators and live streaming platforms driving these conversations, these cultural conversations, right? Because they're live, right? Like these creators are going live every single day. They're reacting to things, they're playing games, they're having these huge moments. And I think that kind of format lends itself obviously really well to sports, which are also traditionally broadcast live. So yeah, and also you know, gamers aren't just into games, right? They have a lot of other interests, and sports being one of them. I think, yeah, the crossover between sports and gaming is so huge. So I think there's a huge opportunity there.
Yeah, this brings us to the point around the culture, right? Because these are not just static thing. The culture and community around sport, athletes, music, and social media, it really brings us together. So, Laura, could you say a few things about how memes and WhatsApp are an important part of the story here when it comes to Kaze TV?
Yeah, I think memes in Brazil, they are a huge thing. Abroad, I believe so, but Brazilians have this way to communicate that is always very expressive, face expression, hands expression, and I believe that memes in chats fit perfectly with our way to communicate. That's why it's a big thing for us during chats. And I myself, I haven't met Casemiro before, so I met him through the memes. So even for non heavy consumers of sports, I like sports, but I'm not a heavy consumer to be watching soccer games every week. I heard and I saw Casemiro through these memes. And I believe this creates a connection that goes beyond sports consumers, that connects with people in a way that is through emotions. So as Amanda was saying about these creators, they are every day in people's lives, and people are start to engage with them through this moment that they are not something that is far away from, like in this legacy channels transmission. They are in their everyday conversations.
Yeah, and that really ties it to this kind of 360-degree experience that isn't just the 90 minutes of the match, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's why brands are so interested in audience activation, and memes are a way to extend that audience activation for 24, 72-hour cycles after the game is complete, right? So yeah, I wanted to put on screen here a couple of stats around this, if I can, and just to give us a chance to react to this, to kind of quantify it for brands and brand partners. So I'm going to borrow some stats here from Sportradar, if I can get this to load. And if not, I'll try it differently here. Yep. So the important thing for brands and brand partners is like, how do you quantify the upside? How do you monetize and negotiate the right rates when you're partnering with a streamer? You're considering your ad buy strategy, whether that's DSP, traditional, etc. These are really interesting stats to me because I hadn't seen this quantified so directly. So we're looking at the 23%, 18%, and 2.7x uplift stats here from SportRadar. This is a Feb 25 sourced sync in the build up to World Cup. But yeah, 23% higher ad recall when an ad is aligned with cultural moments. We're talking about cultural moments here, not just athlete hits a ball at 120 miles an hour out of the stadium. Does that stat matter? Cultural moments are much more than stats. So that's something I want to come back to in a moment. 18% uplift in emotional engagement when ads are contextually relevant. So memes are hyper contextual, right? So memes are a way of speaking
Exactly.
a language there, and streamers are kind of producing cultural content. So I think aligning and partnering with live streamers, if you're a brand and that's not something that you do today, you can tap into this 18% emotional engagement uplift. And finally, brand favorability. When I talk to marketers, a lot of this measurement is done super manually. You might run like a focus group or a survey before a campaign, after a campaign to try to understand brand favorability. But if you're looking at 2.7x stronger brand favorability, that's a 170% increase when a brand is aligned with a significant moment. Obviously, we're all hunting for significant moments to tie the right campaign, the right message at the right time. So this is not an ad for something in particular, but more food for discussion here. And I want to bring this to you, Amanda. Why should brands consider adding streamer partnerships to their strategy if it's something they're not doing already today?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a lot of that there with those stats. Live streaming is a
Yeah.
cultural moment creator, and I see live streaming also as a community builder, right? People don't log on to Twitch to find a random creator every day. They log into Twitch to go to their favorite 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 creators to watch the content that they're making. And these creators have built these communities over years, not just on Twitch or YouTube or Kick, but on Instagram, on Discord. They've built these kind of personal brands that their communities and their audiences align with. So, like you said, with brands seeing more favorable response when their ad is read by someone who is it's more aligned with, right, or a cultural moment. Like these live streamers are creating those cultural moments. They've created the trust already. So I think if brands work with creators, not just on a one-off campaign or just one ad or one product placement, but kind of creating these more long-term partnerships with these creators, the audience is going to see that, right? Like they trust these creators, they trust what they're saying usually, and yeah, I think having those long-term relationships is also going to extend that trust to the brand, because if the creator trusts it, then the audience is probably going to also trust it.
Yeah, that trust factor is something which really struck me, Lara, in the Kaza TV example, because they have assembled, I think it's 400 million plus USD in brand partnerships with top
Wow.
global consumable, FMCG brands. So it's not like a few years ago when I was watching like niche streamers for DJing and music, the tie-ins would be like an audio company for headphones or like an audio software. But I'm seeing top global consumer brands that are super relatable, that are household names, partnering with Kazet. So, Lara, why does this make sense, and why are you not surprised that these big brands want to partner with Kazet?
I think it's a little bit connected with what we mentioned before, that Kazet TV and this business example, they made it to pop this bubble of only having consumers of sports. Because the main movement that they did, in my point of view, is that they turned the camera to the transmitters, to the presenter, and for other people that were invited. So this was one of the main moments they did that started and helped it to bring more people to the conversation that they were not only sport related. So me and my nephew, and my 10 years old nephew, and my family could watch the same transmission together, and this generated conversations that was not normally related to to sport brands, that were related to political moments or someone that was watching the game, how they dressed, and other brands that are also related. That's why I think this became kind of broader. And the other point and the other movement that I believe they did was to bring to the conversation people that were not necessarily experts in these sports, for example. They started to bring people that were like me and other people that have different points, different things to ask to the conversation. This is the phenomenon that, for me, the culture phenomenon that was responsible to bring not only sport-related brands, but more brands to the interest, more eyeballs also.
This is such an important point about coming into the living room. You mentioned connecting with your nephews, making it cross-generational family. So it's not it's not this image that I have of like someone like me at their computer desk, streaming. It's really coming into the living room via intelligent TV and things like that. I'm looking at the Kaza TV channel. I was just trying to share the screen, and they have, in addition to the football highlights, they have kind of like a talk show style roundtable where they have funny games and they play games against their guests. And there's a lot of laughs. There's a lot of that goes beyond just who scored a goal,
Yeah.
right? And I think that creation of community, the living room experience, and the family building aspect beyond sports is super interesting for kind of the next topic I want to get into, which is, practical takeaways for brands and media teams. But just before I go there, let me come back to you, Amanda. Like, considering the broadening appeal of these type of creator networks, like, what are you seeing in the data or the campaigns that you review that show kind of the power of partnering with creators versus official traditional broadcast?
Yeah, I was gonna also say, like, kind of when you were talking about being able to measure and go into the living rooms of these people, something that brands can take advantage of that I think a lot of them are not too familiar with right now is the chat function on Twitch, on Kick, on YouTube. Something that you can't get on even connected TV or regular TV broadcasts is you can't get into the thoughts and minds of the people literally in that moment. But on Twitch, you can see what people are talking about. You can see if they're talking about your brand. You can run sentiment analysis to see if they're negatively or positively talking about your brand or cultural moments in general. Getting ideas for the next thing or clips to post on social media. And you can do that kind of like at an automated scale way using like different technologies, ours included. I'll plug that. But like you can get into the hearts and minds of the consumers like right away, and kind of take advantage of that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so powerful. You mentioned measuring. I'm thinking about new product launch or new brand activation campaign. Why not use the instant feedback you get in the chat instead of waiting weeks for survey and focus group results to come in?
Yeah.
You can iterate campaigns more on demand, more on the fly now, especially with generative AI tools. So yeah, we at Omniscient see a future where attention and emotion are more dynamically integrated to brand campaigns and brand voice. And so being aware and attentive and responsive is a prerequisite to getting there, right? Having solid, high quality data to make decisions and to run your orchestration with is an area that we see customers really excited about, and it's coming faster than we think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
any other points looking back at these examples that either of you wanted to raise? Because I'm super excited to take the next 15 minutes for concrete recommendations for brands and marketers otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add also, like, and we talked a little bit more about data and like kind of the data behind this. But at least like on the esports side of things, we're seeing, I can draw a lot of parallels between esports and more traditional sports, I guess you would say. I would argue they are
Sure.
very similar. But on the esports side of things, um, organizers have been really leaning into the idea of co-streaming. Co-streaming, if people are not familiar with, is if, say, Ubisoft is running an esports tournament, they partner with regular live streaming creators, fans of the game, players of the game, people who aren't necessarily participating in the tournament. But for example, Ubisoft paid Jinxie, one of the biggest Rainbow Six Siege creators, to co-stream their biggest R6 Invitational, and he, I think, got over half of all of the viewership. So these brands and these organizers are seeing that people want to watch creators. They don't necessarily want to watch the official brand broadcast or the official esports broadcast. And I think the ones that don't see this as a competition, but as kind of a way to amplify their voice, are going to be the ones that win. And I can see a very similar thing happening in sports. I think a sports game like for the World Cup, for example, if you had someone like I Show Speed co-streaming, he's like a huge Manchester United fan. And not all of his viewers are Manchester United fans or even football fans, but that brings it back to what you were talking about, Lara, about getting more eyeballs on it, right? You're putting these games and these events in front of people who might not have found it before. So I think the brands that do that are going to win a bit more.
Yeah. Wow, those are some great results from that partnership. And I think that this kind of data-driven approach can complement intuition. I know that we talked in the pre-brief about how often C-level might say, hey, I've seen this person, my kids know that. Let's say it's Lionel Messi. Like, I want Messi. I want a photo with him. I want to make sure that we have brand adjacency with Lionel Messi. And it's like, okay, yeah, but there's an entire universe of thousands of global athletes. So if I could show you an athlete that gives you 60% of Messi's engagement at 5% of the cost, would you be interested in that? That's kind of the approach that we're taking at Omnisent right now with creating a social capital index for global athletes so that brands can actually query and understand like, ooh, this is a really great opportunity. This athlete offers me deep engagement at much less cost, and it helps me and my team go beyond, oh, I like their follower count, or like, oh yeah, my boss has heard of them, so they told me to do this. So this is a trend that we want to get deeper into with marketers. So Lara, I wanted to come to you on this and just ask like about staying relevant and being authentic. If you're advising a brand or a rights holder right now, what do you recommend they evaluate in the next 12 months to stay relevant?
Yeah, the first thing that I would evaluate at this point is how, of course, hear people, what they're saying, as we mentioned before, but also evaluate how different niches are starting to consume. Also, we talked in previous conversations about female audiences and very good examples like from Mattel, for example, and brands they are connected with niches of consumers, new generations of consumers. I will be paying attention to how these different niches inside the niche are behaving. And especially in the community building conversation that we were having, as a brand, and as a brand strategist, my biggest advice in this moment will be not be worried, so much worried or concerned about creating new conversations, but jump into conversations that are already happening in their audiences, because this is a more organic way to be part and have people engagement in a soft and a smooth way, not feeling like kind of forced. This will be my main advice for them.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, you talked about niching down and the niche within the niche. Could you give an example of that or explain that a bit more? I found that interesting.
I think female consumers of sports, this is a very good example now. Of course, women always consume sports, but now they are more engaged and they feel this is something that I assume, of course, but they feel like they are more part of the conversation. And now with more women and more female-based teams and events being transmitted and gaining more attention right now, I think women are feeling they are being invited to the conversation, not only invited to the conversation, but having a voice of authority in this conversation and making decisions behind sports. So this will be like a focus that I would give, and some topic that I put light in this year.
That's such a timely point with in the North American market with NCAA March Madness heating up, starting in about 2 weeks away. So I've been watching March Madness evolve, and the the women's tournament and the men's tournament used to be resourced very differently. There were viral memes about the poor weight training conditions for the women's athletes versus the men having like the multi-million dollar operation, and this was also reflected in the quality and the production level for storytelling around those tournaments. So I think now that we've seen Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and a lot of other young talents go from this tournament where their kind of star is born maybe on the national stage and compete against each other over multiple years. So you can see that kind of Brady Mahomes type dynamic develop, these rivalries develop. Hearing more about the coaches and their stories too. I mean, raising the production value has also created more brand opportunity because these athletes, Caitlin Clark and others, are really signing now the contracts that are justified because, as you mentioned, the audience is there, the audience is
Yeah.
engaged. If you tell me a great story, I'll be there. If you, if you tell it to me kind of halfway, it's tough for me to engage. So I think that's a great example. Yeah.
I think seeing the I'm repping the PWHL right now. Seeing the two women's hockey players from the Olympic medal team and the two men's players too, Megan Keller and Hillary Knight, on the stage of SNL, last
Hmm.
weekend was just incredible to watch. And I think that story, as divisive as it got, I think that story that developed was incredible. And in the end, it got these two women's hockey players from the PWHL on national television. It got so much coverage, and I think kind of the story behind that is that people want to watch women's sports, and if you put the funding behind it, if you put the storytelling, if you put the resources behind it, people will watch it. And it kind of showed in the amount of applause that the women got versus the men's, I will say, which was really great to watch. So yeah, I'm excited for that too.
Yeah, yeah. This is a transformative moment that I think brands need to be aware of because if I'm marketing a fintech product, like it's a banking or an investment product, if I'm working with a traditional agency and they're not tuned in, they're going to kind of code that men's audience and men's sports for me. But what we were talking about in the previous, like who has the spend power, what the active buyer is, and who's making that buying decision is really changing. And this has come clearer to me looking at the construction of new stadiums for MLS soccer and women's soccer in the U.S. because they're building from scratch with 2026 content. They're breaking ground now. So the way that the stadium's designed, the founding brand partners, everything about the game day experience is actually not only for me, it's actually for all of us, which I think is really exciting. Everything from the way that restrooms are designed, the kind of concessions on offer, brands, how placements work, how the athletes receive injury treatment and workouts and stuff like that. So I think that this is really interesting when you consider how much capital is flowing into the sports ecosystem as well. So there has never been more cross-border investment in sports. and the entry of private equity as well as athletes to ownership stakes. LeBron James having taken like I think a 1% stake in Liverpool 15 or 16 years ago that's now worth 1 billion plus. There's quite a lot of interesting angles there. I need to double check the numbers on the LeBron stake. I think it's Liverpool has the multi-billion valuation, but yeah, I could go on and on. There's so many interesting converging topics and angles here, but we want to hear from you. So if you are tuned in on LinkedIn, get your comments in. We have time to take a few questions here before we finish, but I need to see those comments come in. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on LinkedIn, feel free to use the Ask Us a Question function, and we'd love to hear from what you want to hear about next. But I have another topic until then. So yeah, I want to talk to the CMOs in the audience, right? So we've brought up a lot of topics. They might be uncomfortable topics. You might uncomfortable in that you've been aware of this, you know where you need to go, you might not be there today. I want to flip it and talk about risks or mistakes. So I would say to both of you, if a CMO is watching this right now, what is the single biggest mistake they could make in the next 3 months? Leaving this open to maybe Lara to take this one first. Yeah.
This is a very good question. I think and we also had this conversation before, the biggest mistake is feel that your brand can be 100%, as I mentioned, original and authentic. Authenticity is a very used word today, but I think we need to take with a grain of salt because some brands are trying to be authentic and they kind of go in a different way. So I think the biggest mistake is not to listen to your audience and to different voices that are starting to talk in these channels that we mentioned previously. Yeah, this will be my main mistake.
Yeah.
I was
Amanda?
going to add on to that.
Yeah.
It's something that we see here at Livad too, right? Actually, we just made did some analysis on the ads that we help brands run on live streams. And one of the really interesting things is that a lot of brands want to be brand safe. They want their creators to just read the ad script as they wrote it, as they approved it, as maybe their lawyers approved it, which totally understand. But what we found when we did our analysis was the kind of engagement score, like the clicks on the ads in those live streams, actually decreased when the creator read the script word for word. The highest clicks we saw were on ad reads that they didn't read the script fully. They mentioned the brand. They might have said it like, yo, like we got a DoorDash ad here, like kind of playing into their their personality, using their words, their language, their cultural language to describe the ad partnership, to read the product placement. And yeah, those were the ads that actually performed the best. So I think that kind of talks exactly what you were talking about, Laura, is like brands that are trying to be totally safe and not do anything also is a little bit hard. So I think you got to trust your audience, trust the people that you're working with, trust those creators, and they'll help you deliver the right messages to their audiences themselves.
Yeah. Especially because their audience from these creators, they know how they speak, they know how they behave, and they know when these feel forced. So my main advice would be like, don't push to force it speeches or pitches or anything like that, because your audience will know.
It's a really important point, and choosing those partners carefully means you're sharing some of your brand equity and reputational risk with them as well. So we also hear a lot about this kind of, how do I make sure that I'm protecting the brands that I'm responsible for? And we are looking at some novel approaches here with data to kind of create a reputational risk score. So we're not only recommending, hey, this is a great athlete for you to partner with, it's all upside. We're actually saying the downside risk is low. And here's why. In several years of their social activity, they are not posting anything which poses a remote kind of like brand risk to you. So that's an area we're really interested in, well, is protecting downside risk. Awesome. So Francesca has a comment, a question from LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, you can ask a comment and I can put it on screen. So Francesca wonders, what about engaging those viewers who are not usually into sport? What kinds of moments does this consumer care about, and how can we involve and engage them? I think that's a really interesting one. And just maybe we could frame it with like a World Cup flavor too, because there might be folks who they're not watching a Champions League or Premier League every year, but they might tune in to support their team during the World Cup. So yeah, I'm interested if this sparks any ideas for either of you.
You want to go, Amanda?
Sure, yeah. I guess like first off, it kind of ties back into what we were talking about with storytelling, right? I'll bring up like heated rivalry, for example, and you talked about like
Yeah.
rivalries in sports in general. But we
Yeah.
know that like those kinds of stories, those kinds of rivalries, the kinds of stories that come out of real moments are not only interesting for sports fans, but are interesting for um, people all around. I think we also see these leagues making memes, like Lara, you're talking about with Kaze TV. Um, I I recently saw some memes from I can't remember. Like I see rugby memes on my feed all the time. I'm not a rugby fan. I don't play rugby. I've never watched rugby. But for some reason, because my friends like them or they're relatable to millennial Gen Z audiences, they show up on my feed. So I think leaning into those trends and finding those stories, finding those moments that are happening are going to be interesting for people who aren't necessarily into the sport. But doing it in a brand safe way, not just doing it because it's funny. I think there is a balance there. So, yeah, I'd say that's how I would do it.
Yeah. That's a great point. The adjacency when it there are those moments which transcend, a goal or a home run or whatever, and they become kind of cultural touch points. There is often there's a human story behind each of these athletes. They're not machines, right? So I was really happy to see some human stories popping up in our analysis the last few weeks about players choosing which country to play for and being torn between US or Germany, or players, dedicating an important goal they scored to their newborn child. And these have carried a lot of weight in the social sphere. So one of the most viral storylines was about this player dedicating a goal to their newborn child. That's something that's about way more than your ranking, the fixtures, like where you are in the table, right? So I do hope that we'll get some of those human stories behind the World Cup this year. And yeah, it's on brands to tell those stories and do it in a really compelling way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Laura.
I think
Yeah.
a good strategy also will be not be too focused only in the high visibility moments, only during the event properly, but build momentum before and keep this conversation after. I remember about an example that I see in 30 seconds from Super Bowl where they let some Easter eggs, a phone number that you could call them later, and after this phone call, they send you a message. So some things that created conversations and sparkle curiosity after the event also. So I think I will start to build before, not to be too focused on this moment, but also keep the conversation after.
Yeah, I think a great example of that from the most recent Super Bowl would be the competing ads from OpenAI and from Anthropic, the makers of Claude.
Yeah.
So during that, you saw Anthropic taking they featured several ad spots where they told stories about why it's not a good idea to have ads in your experience with an AI chatbot. And these were kind of indirect jabs at OpenAI, who a few weeks earlier had announced that there would soon be ads potentially coming. Sam Altman had discussed this. So they took the opportunity to say, "Hey, you're going to see our rivals ad content, and we're directly creating a conversation in relation to that content and to you, the viewer." And I thought that was whether or not it's a good idea or I agree with it or not. They were contextually aware of that moment. They were contextually aware of
Mm.
that moment. They were dynamic enough to make sure their campaign was relevant for that moment, and that is something that viewers who are not usually into sport can really care about and dive into. Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
Francesca. Yeah.
And keeping in this Super Bowl moment, of course, we cannot not mention the halftime concert, because it
Yeah.
was this year also something that responded to a cultural request. It's not a minor fact that was the first concert that was not in the main country language, but there is also a big audience behind it, that is a Hispanic audience in the United States, that also having it's heavy consumer and also wants to see something that is in their language, their culture. So it was a big cultural moment also, Super Bowl.
Yeah, the viewership numbers for the halftime show were above the main broadcast of the game, and that hurts me as a Seattle Seahawks fan. But no, it's been called. I think the New York Times called it, the biggest moment in music each
Yeah,
year is the Super
yeah,
Bowl halftime show. So I think that's a great example where over decades, I remember back to decades ago, some of the biggest, most memorable Super Bowl performances as well. It's become a different kind of stage for engaging in cultural conversation as well. So it also brings interesting brand risks or opportunities associated with that, right? So Pepsi, for example, for many years held the rights to, I think it was like the Pepsi halftime show. So I think that's an example of brands going ultra big. In general, the Super Bowl, is it against what we're recommending here, which is to be more dynamic, more measured, to make several bets, maybe Amanda, with multiple creators,
Mm.
or is there still value in that $100 million 30-second ad?
I mean, I'm always going to be an advocate for the small guys because that's kind of what I've built my career on. I think there's different strategies for different folks, right? Like as a Pepsi or a McDonald's or these huge brands that already have the brand recognition, a 30-second ad spot in the Super Bowl is maybe a good idea for getting that attention. I think a lot of brands maybe can't afford that or want to split it up a little bit more. And I would agree that I think there is a lot of value in using smaller creators, smaller activations, but spread out. Because just like what you said, like you can, I think it kind of goes from like top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Like if you're really trying to reach like a niche audience or a certain demographic, you can do that if you work with several creators in the country you're trying to go after, or the gender demographic, or the kind of interest demographic. And yeah, I think that's what live streaming can really do for you, because you know the $100 million 30-second ad spot is going to maybe get you hundreds of millions of eyeballs on it, but you kind of limited in what you can actually do there. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point. It depends on the advertiser objectives. It depends on the advertiser objectives for sure, but the kind of small bets, rapid iteration dynamic, I think that's a bit more of like because I'm coming from big tech, 10 years at Amazon, that speaks more like my language, which is,
Mhm.
running experiments in parallel and then double down on what works, extending those contracts. And you also talked about session extension. This is a very important topic for apps, platforms in like sports betting, anything crypto that is around the sports space is like, how do we,
Mm.
okay, the game has ended, but the consumer journey continues from there. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting part about the live stream is it's not just that match is over, good night, now the next reality TV show is starting. It's more like,
Mhm.
yeah, we're all still here. Like, wow, we need some time to unpack, and that creates those session extension opportunities.
Yeah, especially when your audience is right there and talking and still talking in the chat. and they also have these other channels, right? They have Instagram, they have Discord. They're going to keep talking about it later. The creators can post more about it. Whereas that one-time ad spot, it's one time, right? Although you have other marketers talking about it like us, so maybe
Yeah.
there's something good in that. But I think yeah, there's a lot of benefits to the small guys.
For sure, for sure. Well, I want to finish up on an upbeat, quick win topic. So, what is one thing a brand should do that or can still do before this World Cup to tune in to what we're talking about, be more creator and community native? Um, Obviously, there's not a ton of time left, but are there any small experiments? Any changes in tone? Like, I'm curious if this sparks anything for either of you.
I mean, I would say like experiment, right? With, I mean, live streaming creators, you can activate, at least at Livad here, like you can just activate, in 2 days, right? We try to allow
In
for
two
these super,
days.
yeah, like you can set, if you have your ad assets or we can help you make them, we find the creators and send out the brief and you can go live within like 2 to 3 days. So I think there's a lot that brands can do to test before the World Cup, to start building relationships with these creators, even though, like you said, budgets might be locked in. There's only a few months left, but I think there's a lot of benefit to trying these smaller experiments beforehand and building those relationships instead of just day one of the World Cup, start, end of the World Cup, and that's it, right? Like I think there's a lot you can do beforehand.
Great points. Great points. Yeah.
I will
Lara?
second Amanda on that. I believe this is a big moment and a good moment to start to experiment. There is now competitive platforms where you can start to do that, and I would start to experiment before and gather some feedback before the main event. This will be also my advice. I'll second you on that, Amanda.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it, is something that we often say in tech. So, yeah, getting some collection, running some small experiments so you have some measurements. Even if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I love what Amanda, Lara, and Neil are saying, but I know I can't do it for this World Cup. Can you collect some data now so you have a strong business case later for Q3, Q4? You're going to have a lot more campaigns. You're going to have a lot more at bats to give this a shot. So get the right team around you in terms of partners, in terms of tooling, and yeah, already just run some small experiments, get some data. I think that's what we're all aligned on
Yeah,
here.
I think we need to understand, especially for CMOs, that most of your audience, 90% of your audience is not ready to buy yet. They are still creating, and you have to still gain some mental space in their lives. So just be aware that you are starting to having and creating this space for when your audience is ready to buy. You are there.
Fantastic, fantastic. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you both. Thank you to the audience and as well those tuning in on replay. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'd love to circle back, or you can reach out and connect with each one of us on LinkedIn. Also, Amanda and the Live Ad crew have a great YouTube channel that you can check out if you'd like to see more content like this. And definitely check out Lara on Instagram and TikTok, as well as LinkedIn. She has some great short, quick hits for brands and brand ambassadors to be more on time, in touch, and authentic. Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you, Neil, for this conversation, and Amanda also for this talk. Was really, really exciting to talk about it, and I hope that we have more conversations. So
Definitely. Thank you both. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to do a post brief maybe after World Cup where we could look at how these trends played out, maybe pick a couple of the big cultural moments and look at them from a brand perspective. So let us know. Please drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. And we're super excited to stay connected and hear from you. So, on behalf of all of us, thanks so much and have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Right.